The rain had just started when Ethan Miller pulled his black SUV into the cracked asphalt lot of Hollow Creek's only motel. The town looked like a ghost. Broken streetlights flickered in the mist, and rusted for sale signs leaned against buildings that hadn't seen life in decades. "Ethan, are you sure this is the right place?" Sarah asked, hugging her jacket close. "This is it," Ethan replied. "The town where 32 miners went missing in 1974. No bodies were ever recovered, and people say their ghosts still roam here." Sarah sighed. "Great. Exactly the kind of place I want to spend the weekend." Inside the motel, the air smelled of mildew. The old receptionist barely spoke, just handed them a key with trembling fingers. Ethan noticed the woman's eyes, wide and fearful, like she wanted to say something, but didn't dare. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She heard scratching on the walls, faint voices outside their room window. At first, she thought it was the rain, but when she pressed her ear to the glass, she heard it clearly. "Leave before he finds you." At 3:07 a.m., Ethan's camera, which he had left on the dresser, turned on by itself. The lens pointed toward the bed. A faint shadow crossed the room, tall and broad, carrying something long in its hand. Sarah sat up, gasping. "Ethan, someone's in here." Ethan jumped up, grabbed a flashlight, and swept the room. Nothing. The door was locked. But when they checked the camera playback, the footage made Sarah's blood run cold. A figure stood in the corner, wearing a miner's helmet. The beam of its cracked light shone directly at the bed, and just before the camera cut out, the figure raised its pickaxe, then vanished. The rain had stopped, but the woods surrounding Hollow Creek were still dripping with moisture. The air smelled of wet earth and rust as Ethan and Sarah pushed through the tall grass that led to the mine entrance. A faded sign leaned against a rotting post. "Hollow Creek Mining Co. Closed. Danger. Keep out." The chain link fence was broken, twisted as if something had forced its way out rather than in. Ethan raised his camera, letting the lens capture every detail. "Perfect," he muttered. "This is what people want to see, the place where it all started." Sarah hugged her jacket closer. "Ethan, this place was shut down for a reason. Look at it, it's collapsing. If we go in there..." He cut her off, flashing a grin that didn't quite hide his own nerves. "That's the point. The truth doesn't hide in safe places." The moment they stepped into the tunnel, the temperature dropped. Their breaths turned white in the glow of Ethan's flashlight. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, each drop echoing like a ticking clock. The walls were carved with deep scratches, long lines etched into stone. Sarah leaned closer, running her fingers just above the surface. "These don't look like normal tool marks." Ethan zoomed in with his camera. The scratches weren't random. They formed words. "Help me. Don't dig. 1974. Sarah pulled back sharply. "Someone wrote this in here. Someone trapped." They pressed on. Wooden beams held the ceiling overhead, but many had rotted and sagged. Dust swirled in the narrow flashlight beam. At one point, Ethan stumbled over an old helmet lying in the dirt. Its visor was shattered, and inside it smelled of mildew and decay. "Don't touch that," Sarah whispered, clutching his arm. But Ethan was already kneeling, brushing dust off the floor. Beside the helmet was a leather notebook. Its cover was cracked and curling, the pages stained brown. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was jagged, uneven. Day 4, underground. No food, no light, but we hear digging. We thought it was the rescue crew, but it never gets closer. It just circles us, always circling. Sarah's voice trembled. Put it down, Ethan. Please. Just as she spoke, the tunnel went silent. The dripping water stopped. Even their breathing seemed swallowed by the dark. Then it came. Clink. A sharp metallic strike against stone. Clink. Clink. It echoed from deep in the shaft, slow and deliberate. Sarah froze. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the dim flashlight beam. Tell me you heard that. Ethan swallowed hard. It's probably just water hitting metal. But the sound came again, closer this time. Clink, a pause. Clink. Ethan lifted his camera. The red recording light blinked in the darkness. He swung the lens toward the far end of the tunnel and froze. Something stood there. A shape taller than any man, its outline just barely lit by the weak glow of his flashlight. A helmet gleamed faintly. Something long and jagged hung from its hand. Sarah's breath hitched. Ethan. Before he could respond, the shadow moved. Not forward, not back, but sideways into the wall, like it had melted into stone. The light revealed nothing but a fresh gouge in the tunnel wall, deep, wet, and new. They ran. Neither spoke until the pale gray sky of dawn broke through the entrance behind them. Ethan bent over, gasping. He glanced back. The mine was silent again, but just before they turned away, a faint red glow flickered in the darkness inside, as if a lantern had just been lit. The diner in Hollow Creek was almost empty. Morning light filtered weakly through dust-streaked windows, casting pale shadows across the cracked leather booths. Sarah stirred her untouched coffee, her hands trembling just enough to rattle the spoon against the cup. Ethan sat opposite her, replaying footage on his camera. Grainy black and white images flickered across the tiny screen. The helmet, the carved words, the shadow in the tunnel. Sarah shivered. Don't show me that again. Before Ethan could argue, the bell above the door jingled. An old woman shuffled inside, her gray shawl pulled tightly around her thin shoulders. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her eyes dark and hollow. She carried with her the smell of damp earth and smoke. The waitress whispered under her breath, "That's Martha. Don't stare." Martha didn't order anything. She walked straight to their booth as though she had been expecting them. "You two." Her voice was rough, low, like gravel sliding over stone. "You've been down there, haven't you? In the mines." Ethan glanced at Sarah, then forced a smile. "We're just filming a documentary. Local history, that's all." Martha's eyes narrowed. "History? That place doesn't hold history, boy. It holds hunger." Sarah's grip on her cup tightened. "What do you mean?" The old woman leaned closer. The faint smell of ashes clung to her breath. "The miner doesn't forgive trespassers. You go digging where you shouldn't, you wake him. And once he wakes, he follows." From inside her shawl, Martha pulled out a small object, a crude charm made of twine and rusted nails bound together in the shape of a man. She placed it on the table with trembling hands. "Keep this. Hang it by your door. It won't stop him, but it may confuse him long enough for you to run." Sarah stared, horrified. "You actually believe all this?" Martha's eyes locked on hers. For the first time, her voice softened. "Belief has nothing to do with it. I've seen what he does. I've heard the screams under the ground when the wind turns. You think the town emptied out because of jobs? No, it emptied because people went missing, one by one. And the ones who stayed," her voice cracked, "they were taken." Ethan slid the charm across the table with a smirk. "Look, I appreciate the story, but..." Martha's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. Her nails dug into his skin. Her voice rose, shaking with fury. "Don't mock me. You've already been marked. I can smell the mine dust on you. He knows you're here now, and once he chooses, he doesn't stop." The entire diner had gone silent. The waitress stared, pale-faced, frozen in place. Martha finally released him, her hand trembling. "Leave Hollow Creek tonight. If you don't, you'll wish you never came." She shuffled away, leaving the charm on the table. The bell above the door jingled softly as she disappeared into the fog outside. Sarah's eyes were wide, her face pale. "Ethan, maybe she's right. Maybe we should leave." Ethan stared at the charm, his jaw tight. "Or maybe," he said, forcing a smile, "we just got our first real interview. Paranormal gold." But deep inside, neither of them laughed. Outside, the fog pressed against the diner windows, curling like pale fingers. And somewhere in the distance, faint and metallic, there was a sound. Clink, clink. The motel room smelled of mildew and old carpet. Rain tapped softly against the cracked window as Ethan set up his laptop on the rickety desk. Sarah sat on the bed, hugging her knees, staring at the charm Martha had left them. It hung now from the motel lamp, swaying slightly with every draft. Ethan plugged in the camera, transferring the footage they had shot inside the mine. The video flickered on the laptop screen, grainy, unstable. "All right," he muttered, leaning close. "Let's see what our friend in the shadows looks like, frame by frame." At first, it was normal. The tunnel, their voices, the dripping water. But when Ethan slowed it down, another sound crept through the speakers. Low, distorted, like someone breathing directly into the microphone. Sarah sat up, her eyes narrowing. "Do you hear that?" Ethan replayed it, adjusting the volume. The sound grew clearer, layered beneath their conversation in the mine. It wasn't just breathing, it was whispering. The voice was deep, guttural, dragging each word like stone scraping across metal. "Leave. Buried. Mine is mine." Sarah covered her ears. "Turn it off. Please, turn it off." Ethan froze the footage on the moment where Sarah had spotted the strange silhouette. At normal speed, it was just a blur. But frame by frame, there it was. The figure stood taller than the tunnel ceiling should allow. Its helmet gleamed faintly, cracked glass catching the flashlight beam. The pickaxe in its hand reflected light even though no light touched it. Its body seemed stretched, twisted, like it didn't quite fit the camera's lens. And then, on the very last frame before it vanished, two glowing eyes stared directly into the camera. Sarah's breath hitched. Oh my God. The laptop speakers suddenly hissed with static. For a moment, the entire motel room filled with distortion, the voice whispering louder than before. You can't hide. Bang! Both of them jumped. A knock rattled the thin motel door. Not a friendly knock, but slow, heavy, 3 times. Bang, bang, bang. Sarah clutched Ethan's arm. Don't answer it. Ethan crept toward the door anyway, camera in hand. He pressed his eye to the peephole, but there was nothing, only the rain falling on the empty parking lot. When he turned back, the laptop screen had gone black. For a moment, the reflection of the room stared back at them. Then, without any command, the footage started playing again. Not the mine, not their recording, something else. The screen showed the motel room itself, as though being filmed from the corner. Ethan and Sarah sat frozen, watching themselves watch the screen. Sarah's voice cracked. Ethan, that's live. That's us. But the camera, where is the camera? And then, from the corner of the screen, a shape emerged. A tall, helmeted figure stepping into frame. The laptop went dead. The motel lamp flickered. Outside, the rain turned to silence. The motel room was suffocating in silence. The laptop screen stayed black, the little charm on the lamp swaying harder now, though the air was still. Sarah grabbed her jacket. We're leaving, right now. Ethan hesitated, but one look at her pale face convinced him. He stuffed the camera into his bag, slung it over his shoulder, and they ran out into the rain-soaked night. Instead of heading for the main road, Sarah pulled him toward the back, where a narrow dirt path led into the wood. Ethan turned his camera on without thinking, the red recording light trembling in the mist. "Do you hear that?" Sarah gasped. The sound was closer now. Between the trees, shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally, bending toward them. Suddenly, Sarah screamed. A figure lunged from the fog, helmet gleaming, pickaxe raised. Ethan barely managed to shove her aside as the weapon came crashing down, splitting the soil where they had stood. The ground shook. A spray of dirt hit their faces. Ethan caught only a glimpse through the camera lens. A massive silhouette, head tilted unnaturally, glowing eyes burning through the mist. "Run!" he shouted. They bolted deeper into the forest. Branches whipped against their faces. Ethan's lungs burned, but the sound of pursuit never slowed. That horrible rhythm, clink, clink, always just behind them. They stumbled into a small clearing where a half-broken wooden shack leaned against the trees. Its door hung open, swinging in the wind. "Inside," Sarah cried. They dove through the doorway, slamming the rotten wood shut behind them. The shack smelled of mold and rust. Inside, old tools lay scattered, their metal corroded with age. For a moment, silence. Only their ragged breathing filled the air. Then the wall shuddered. Bang! Dust rained from the ceiling. Another strike. Bang! The board split, a jagged pickaxe blade punching through, inches from Sarah's face. She screamed, stumbling back. The blade withdrew. Another strike, higher this time, splintering the wood. Ethan fumbled with the camera, recording through sheer instinct. His hands shook violently, the red light flashing as the wall cracked further. Through the gap, they saw it. A single glowing eye staring inside. Bang! The entire shack groaned. Sarah grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the back window. They smashed through the glass, tumbling into the wet grass outside. They didn't look back. The forest swallowed them again. Their legs carried them blindly through fog and mud until, at last, they stumbled onto a gravel road. In the distance, headlights approached. A car. Salvation. But just before they flagged it down, Ethan risked one glance back into the woods. There, at the tree line, the miner stood watching, lantern glowing faintly, pickaxe resting on his shoulder. He didn't chase this time. He just waited. And Ethan knew this wasn't over. The car that picked them up was an old pickup, driven by a man too tired to ask questions. He dropped them near the edge of town, muttering something about not driving past Hollow Creek after dark. By the time Ethan and Sarah reached the motel again, dawn was breaking, pale and colorless. The storm had passed, but the fog clung stubbornly to the ground, curling around the tires of abandoned cars. Sarah hadn't said a word since the woods. She just walked beside Ethan, pale, clutching her jacket tight. Inside, Sarah collapsed onto the bed without removing her shoes. Ethan set up the charm Martha had given them, hanging it from the door handle this time. He tried to sound calm, even light. "We'll rest for a few hours, then we'll figure out where to go. Maybe interview the sheriff, check records, anything." Sarah didn't answer. She stared at the ceiling, eyes glassy. Exhaustion dragged them both under quickly, the weight of sleepless fear pressing down. Sarah woke in the middle of the night, or thought she did. The motel room looked the same, but the air was wrong. Too heavy, too cold. She sat up slowly. Ethan was asleep beside her, but the window across the room was wide open, the curtain fluttering in the stale breeze. "Ethan," she whispered. No response. She slid off the bed, bare feet touching the cold carpet. The whispering started again, low, broken, coming from the window. "Sarah, down below, waiting for you." Her breath trembled in her chest. She crept closer, the curtains shifting like skeletal fingers. When she pulled them aside, the miner's face filled the window. His cracked helmet gleamed in the moonlight. His eyes glowed a pale, sickly white. Slowly, his hand reached through the window. Not flesh, not metal, but something between, dripping with dark mud. It stretched toward her throat. She jolted upright in bed, gasping. The room was silent. Ethan stirred, confused. "Sarah, what is it?" She touched her throat with shaking hands. It burned, red marks where fingers had been. Ethan's eyes widened. That wasn't just a dream, was it? Sarah shook her head slowly, tears welling. And then, from the corner of the room, the laptop, dead since the night before, lit up by itself. On the screen was a new recording, Sarah sleeping, the miner's shadow leaning over her, whispers filling the speakers. Soon. The motel room was heavy with silence. Sarah hadn't spoken since waking from her nightmare, her eyes fixed on the faint bruises around her throat. Ethan tried to keep his focus on the laptop, replaying the strange footage, but his hands trembled with every keystroke. This isn't possible," he muttered. "Something's tampering with the files. Maybe electromagnetic interference, or—" Sarah cut him off. Her voice was flat, distant. "Ethan, he touched me. Do you understand that? It wasn't a dream." Before Ethan could reply, there was a knock at the door. Not heavy, not slow, an ordinary knock this time. Both of them froze. "Who is it?" Ethan called. A man's voice answered. Calm, low, authoritative. "Detective Holloway, Hollow Creek PD. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Ethan opened the door cautiously. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood in the hallway. His suit was wrinkled, his badge hanging from a chain around his neck. Deep lines etched his face, and his eyes carried the weight of years of sleepless nights. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Holloway stepped inside, scanning the room in one glance. The charm on the door, the camera equipment, the exhausted faces. He didn't sit until Ethan gestured toward the chair. "I know why you're here," Holloway said quietly. "The mines, the disappearances, and him." Sarah's head snapped up. "You know about the miner?" Holloway's jaw tightened. "I know enough." From his coat pocket, Holloway pulled out a thick folder yellowed with age. He dropped it onto the motel desk with a dull thud. Police reports. Missing persons. All from Hollow Creek. Last one dated 1987. Ethan flipped the folder open. Black and white photographs slid out. Faces of men and women, children, families. Beside each photo was a short note. Last seen near the mines. Last seen walking home. Never found. Sarah's hand shook as she picked up one photo. A teenage girl with long, dark hair, smiling brightly. The note beneath read, "Sarah Holloway, 1974. She looked up sharply. "Wait, Holloway?" The detective's eyes darkened. "My sister." He leaned forward, his voice low. "I was a kid when she vanished. My father searched for weeks, but the mine was already closed. The town stopped talking about it. Too many missing. Too much fear. They buried it under silence." Sarah whispered, "And the miner?" Holloway hesitated, then opened a smaller envelope. Inside were sketches, drawn in pencil, shaky but detailed. Each one showed the same figure, a tall man in a cracked helmet, holding a pickaxe, eyes glowing faintly. These aren't just ghost stories. Every missing case had at least one witness who claimed to see him. My father said the mine wasn't empty, it was alive, and it fed. Ethan's hand hovered over the last page of the file. It wasn't a photo this time, it was evidence. A plastic sheet sealed over a scrap of paper. On it, scrawled in dried brown-red letters, "Stay out. He waits." Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth. Holloway's voice dropped even lower. "If you too went inside that mine, you've already brought him closer. And if Martha warned you, she was right. You should leave Hollow Creek while you still can." Outside, thunder rumbled, though no storm showed in the sky. The fog pressed against the window harder than ever. And in the faint reflection of the glass, just for a second, Sarah swore she saw a cracked helmet, watching from behind her own reflection. The three of them sat in the dim motel room, as the fog outside thickened like a wall. muting the world. Holloway lit a cigarette, the ember glowing faintly in the shadows. He exhaled slowly, his eyes never leaving the folder on the desk. "You want answers?" he said. "Then you need the truth about Hollow Creek." The town wasn't abandoned because of jobs. It was abandoned because the mine cursed it from the beginning. Sarah shivered, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Ethan hit record on his camera, the red light blink. Holloway didn't object. Back in 1903, Holloway began. A company called Black Ridge Mining opened the Hollow Creek shaft. They promised jobs, prosperity, a future. Families flocked here. For a while, it worked. Stores opened, the main street thrived, kids played in the schoolyard. But the mine. He tapped ash into a coffee cup. The mine took more than it gave. Collapses, gas leaks, accidents. Men went in and didn't come out. Officially, they called them workplace hazards. But the survivors, those who crawled out, spoke of shadows moving in the tunnels. Something digging where no one should be digging. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. The miner. Holloway nodded once. By 1920, dozens of men were dead. Black Ridge started paying off families to keep quiet. The town sheriff back then, my grandfather, filed reports, but everyone disappeared into company archives. The mine made too much money to shut down. People needed the jobs, so they ignored the screams, the disappearances. They told themselves it was just bad luck. Ethan leaned forward. But the disappearances didn't stop? Holloway's face hardened. No, they got worse. Whole crews vanished in the deep shafts. No bodies, just helmets, tools, blood smeared on stone. He pulled another page from the folder, a newspaper clipping, yellowed and torn. The headline read, "Tragedy in Hollow Creek, 27 miners presumed dead." That was the collapse, Holloway said. Everyone thought it was an accident. My sister, she vanished the same week. Some said she wandered into the tunnels looking for someone. Others said she was taken. After that, people started leaving. The company pulled out. By the 1980s, the town was nearly empty. Sarah studied the clipping, her hands trembling. So this has been going on for a century. Holloway's eyes glinted in the dim light. And longer. Some say the land was cursed before the mine was even dug. Black Ridge just opened the wound. Ethan flipped through the reports, his mind racing. Wait, these dates, 1912, 1937, 1955, 1974. That's every 20 to 25 years. Sarah looked at him sharply. A cycle? Holloway nodded grimly. Every generation, the miner wakes hungry. The disappearances spike, then silence, until the next time. And if I'm right, the next cycle is happening now. The room went cold. Sarah pulled her blanket tighter, her lips trembling. "What does he want?" she whispered. Holloway stared at her, his voice low, steady. "He doesn't want. He takes." A sudden crash outside the window made them all jump. Ethan rushed to the glass, camera in hand. The parking lot was empty except for a single abandoned car. Its windshield was cracked down the middle, as if struck by something heavy. The fog swallowed it whole within seconds. When Ethan turned back, Holloway was already closing the file, his voice firm. "If you two stay here, you won't survive the week. The miner won't stop until he's finished his cycle, and this time, you're part of it." Sarah's throat tightened. "Why us?" The detective's eyes flickered toward the charm on the door, swaying slightly in the draft. Because you went looking, and now he knows your names. A night air pressed heavy as Holloway led Ethan and Sarah down Hollow Creek's empty main street. Rusted cars sat frozen in place, their headlights long dead, their windows shattered. Above them, a motel sign buzzed faintly, only half its letters glowing. Sarah hugged her jacket tighter. "Where are we going?" Holloway's boots crunched on broken glass. The old school. That's where most of the reports ended. Kids disappeared there in the 70s. Teachers, too. The town boarded it up after the collapse. But people say the miner walks those halls when the fog's thick enough. Ethan gripped his camera tighter, his pulse quickening. Perfect. That's exactly where we should be. Sarah shot him a look that could kill. The Hollow Creek School loomed from the mist, a hulking shape of crumbling brick and broken windows. Its front doors were chained, but Holloway led them around back, where one door hung crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, the smell hit first: rot, mildew, and something sharper, metallic: blood. Sarah gagged, covering her mouth. Ethan clicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting across peeling paint and graffiti-scrawled walls. Words like "leave" and "he's here" stretched across lockers in dripping black paint. The beam caught on something smeared across the floor. A dark, thick stain leading down the hall. Sarah whispered, "That's blood." Holloway nodded grimly. "And it's fresh." They followed the trail cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the hollow building. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps behind them. The trail led past classrooms where overturned desks lay like skeletons. Chalkboards still marked with half-erased lessons. Civil War, 1861, 1865. In one room, a child's shoe lay abandoned in the corner, covered in dust. Sarah froze when she saw it, her face pale. This place feels wrong. Ethan kept the camera steady, zooming in on the trail. It's leading us somewhere. The blood trail ended at the gymnasium doors. Holloway pushed them open slowly, the metal hinges groaning. Inside, the bleachers loomed like shadows, the basketball court warped and splintered. In the far corner, the trail thickened, pooling beneath the broken door of the locker room. "Stay behind me," Holloway muttered, drawing his flashlight like a weapon. He pushed the door open. The beam cut across smashed lockers, broken mirrors, and puddles of standing water. And in the center of the floor, a helmet. Old, rusted, its visor cracked down the middle. Ethan whispered, "Just like the one in the mine." Sarah pointed with a trembling hand. "Look, on the wall." Words were written in fresh, dripping blood. "Not yours, mine." Ethan's stomach twisted. The letters dripped slowly, as though just written. Then the sound started. Clink, clink, from somewhere deep in the building. Sarah backed up against Holloway. "He's here." The gym doors slammed shut behind them with a thunderous bang. The lights flickered, and through the cracked mirror, a tall figure in a broken helmet stared back at them. The mirror shattered with a sound like a gunshot. Shards of glass clattered across the locker room floor. But when Holloway swung his flashlight toward the reflection, there was nothing. Only the broken helmets staring back from the shadows. Sarah clutched Holloway's arm, her voice trembling. "We need to leave. Now." Ethan, still filming despite his pale face, shook his head. "If we leave, we lose the trail. Don't you get it? He's playing with us. He wants us to see this." Holloway's jaw tightened. "You don't know what you're dealing with, kid. This isn't some urban legend. People have died down here." They pushed back into the hallway, following Holloway's steady light. As the gym doors creaked open again, the heavy fog rolled into the school like a living thing. Sarah whispered, "Why are you helping us? You could have just told us to get out of town." Holloway's face darkened. "Because I've seen this before." He stopped in front of a bulletin board covered in rotting paper. With one gloved hand, he pulled down a water-stained newspaper clipping pinned there. "Local children vanish. No bodies recovered." Another, "Holloway's partner last seen near Hollow Creek Mines." Sarah's eyes widened. "Your partner?" Holloway nodded, his voice low. "Detective James Rourke. He disappeared investigating these same cases 15 years ago. The locals told us the miner took him. I didn't believe them, but when we found his badge in the tunnels, I stopped sleeping." Ethan lowered his camera for once, staring at Holloway. "So this isn't just about us. You're trying to finish what you started." Holloway's flashlight beam trembled slightly as he exhaled. "I'm not letting anyone else end up like Rourke. Not you, not her, not anyone." He squared his shoulders, a strange fire in his eyes now. The skeptical detective mask had fallen. He was a man possessed by unfinished duty. "From here on," Holloway said firmly, "I'm with you. We end this together." Suddenly, a crash echoed down the hall, the sound of lockers slamming open one after another. Bang, bang, bang. The three froze. Sarah's breath came in quick gasps. Ethan's camera whirred as he lifted it again. Then, from the darkness at the far end of the hall, the rhythmic clink, clink of metal boots dragging on concrete. Holloway raised his flashlight, his voice sharp. "Run!" They sprinted down the corridor as the lights flickered violently overhead. Behind them, heavy footsteps echoed, impossibly close. For the first time, the old detective wasn't warning them to leave. He was running with them. Three of them burst out of the school's side doors, stumbling into the fog-drenched night. The air outside was no less suffocating. The mist clung to their skin, seeping into their lungs like smoke. Sarah bent over, clutching her knees, gasping for breath. "I can't keep doing this." Holloway scanned the street, pistol drawn, flashlight darting across rusted cars and sagging storefronts. The shadows seemed thicker than before, as if the fog itself was hiding something. Ethan still had his camera raised, his face pale but determined. "We got him on tape. I swear I saw it. The miner's reflection in the mirror. He was right there." Holloway's voice was sharp. "Turn that thing off. You need your eyes more than your lens." But Ethan didn't lower it. Sarah straightened, brushing damp hair from her face. "Wait. Do you hear that?" The three froze. Through the fog came a faint, high-pitched whisper. Not one voice, but many, layered over each other, rising and falling like a chant. Sarah turned in a slow circle, her lips trembling. It's calling my name." "Don't listen," Holloway barked, stepping between her and the mist. "That's how it pulls you in." But the whispers grew louder, curling through the fog. echoing inside Sarah's head. Sarah, Sarah, come back to us. She staggered backward, her eyes wide, unfocused. Ethan lunged forward. Sarah, stay with us. But before his hand could catch hers, the fog thickened into a wall, swallowing her whole. 1 second, she was there, her terrified face visible through the haze. The next, she was gone. Sarah! Ethan's scream ripped through the night as he charged into the fog, the camera bouncing wildly in his hands. Holloway grabbed his arm, yanking him back. No, that's what it wants. If you go after her blind, you'll never come out. Ethan thrashed, eyes wild, tears in his voice. We can't just leave her. But the street was empty now. The whispers had faded, and the only thing left was silence. Ethan sank to his knees, the camera still recording his shaking hands. She's gone. He took her. Holloway stood stiff, his jaw clenched, eyes scanning the fog. He didn't answer right away, because deep down he knew the truth. The miner hadn't just taken Sarah. He had claimed her. And if they didn't move fast, she wouldn't be Sarah anymore when they saw her again. The fog pressed heavy over Hollow Creek, muffling even the sound of their footsteps. Holloway led Ethan through the back streets, keeping his flashlight low, his pistol drawn. Ethan followed in silence, the camera shaking in his hands, his face pale from Sarah's sudden disappearance. Finally, they reached the edge of the town, where rusted railway tracks disappeared into the woods. Beyond lay a collapsed section of earth, the entrance to an abandoned storage tunnel. Down here, Holloway muttered, locals always said the school and the mines were connected. If Sarah was taken, this is where he'd drag her. Ethan swallowed hard, but kept filming. I'm not leaving without proof. If she's alive, we'll find her. Inside, the air was damp and cold, dripping water, echoing like footsteps. Their flashlights barely cut through the dark, revealing walls lined with old mining supports. Ethan's camera picked up something glistening on the walls. At first, he thought it was graffiti. Then he saw it clearly. Symbols, drawn in dark, dried streaks. Circles intersected with jagged lines. Strange runes carved into the wood. Ethan whispered, "What the hell is this?" Holloway crouched, running his hand over one. His brow furrowed. Not graffiti, ritual markings, old, some older than this mine. On the ground, a set of candles sat in a half circle, their wax pooled and hardened. Burned into the dirt between them was a crude sigil, a figure holding a pickaxe, surrounded by what looked like eyes. Ethan replayed the camera's audio, and static hissed through the tunnel. Beneath it, faint voices emerged. The miner, he comes for the lost. Thing's blood keeps him bound. Sacrifice for Hollow Creek. Ethan's breathing grew ragged. They weren't just mining here. They were, worshipping him? Keeping him alive? Holloway's face was grim. Maybe not worship. Maybe fear. Maybe they thought feeding him would keep the town safe. Ethan turned his camera back to the wall. Fresh scratches had been carved into the wood. Holloway yanked Ethan back before he could run toward the echoing voice. "That's not her," he barked, his grip iron on Ethan's arm. "That's him using her voice." Ethan struggled, his camera still pointed toward the dark tunnel. You don't know that. What if she's alive? What if she needs me? Before Holloway could answer, a lantern's glow flickered behind them. They spun around. It was Martha. The old woman stood at the tunnel's mouth, her wrinkled face drawn tight with fear, her bony hands clutching a candle that barely lit her frame. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, her voice broke into a tremble. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered. "It's already too late." Holloway stepped forward, his flashlight beam steady. "Martha, you know what's happening. You've known all along." Martha's lip quivered. She shook her head. "You don't understand. No one ever leaves Hollow Creek. Not really." Ethan shoved the camera toward her. "Then explain it. Who? What is he?" Martha's shoulders sagged, as though the weight of decades had finally collapsed onto her. "The miner was real," she said softly. "His name was Thomas Hargrove, a foreman in the old mines, back in 1890. He was cruel, worked the men to death, beat the ones who slowed, starved the children who carried coal. They rose against him one night, buried him alive deep in the shaft." Her candle flickered violently. "But he didn't die." Martha's eyes were wet now. "They say his rage bound him here. The town elders tried to keep him quiet with blood offerings, animals at first. But when that wasn't enough, people. Every generation, someone had to vanish into the mines, or he would come for us all." Ethan's stomach churned. "So the town just fed him victims? Let him take people?" Martha sobbed. "You think we wanted to? We had no choice. Every time we resisted, more of us died. My own sister was taken when we were girls. I've heard her voice in the fog every night since." She clutched her candle tighter, her face twisting with terror. "And now he's marked the girl. Once he claims her, she'll never come back. She'll be his." Ethan's voice cracked, his desperation boiling over. "Tell me how to stop him." Martha shook her head, her eyes fixed on the dark tunnel beyond. "You don't stop him. You don't fight him. You run. You leave Hollow Creek and never look back." Holloway stepped forward, his voice iron. "Running hasn't worked for over a century. I'm not losing anyone else." Martha's candle flickered lower, the flame barely clinging to life. She whispered one last warning. "If you go after her, you'll all be buried with him." And with that, the candle blew out, though no wind had touched it. The tunnel plunged into darkness, and somewhere deep below, the clang of a pickaxe rang out once more. The tunnels groaned as if the earth itself was shifting. Loose stones rattled from the ceiling, and the sound of the pickaxe echoed closer. Holloway motioned for Ethan to stay behind him, pistol raised, his flashlight cutting through the black. "Martha's right about one thing," Holloway said, his voice steady despite the tremor in the ground. "This thing has been feeding on fear for over a century. But if it bleeds, if it leaves a trace, we can fight it." Ethan gripped his camera tighter. "And if we can't, then we make damn sure Sarah doesn't stay here forever." They followed the tunnel deeper, the air growing colder, the smell of damp earth mixing with rust and rot. Ethan's camera caught markings on the wall. More runes, more sigils carved into the beams that held the earth back. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently. "Move," Holloway barked, shoving Ethan forward. The tunnel collapsed behind them in a roar of stone and dust. Ethan coughed, his camera nearly slipping from his hands. When the air cleared, his flashlight beam revealed a wall of rubble. "Holloway?" Ethan turned, but Holloway was gone. Ethan spun in panic, the camera light bouncing wildly. Then he saw it. Holloway on the other side of the collapse, pounding at the rubble with his flashlight. "Stay calm," Holloway shouted, his voice muffled through the stone. "Find another way around. I'll circle back." But even as he yelled, the tunnel around him shifted again. The ground cracked beneath his boots, and with a thunderous groan, the floor gave way. "Detective!" Ethan screamed, but it was too late. Holloway's figure dropped into darkness, his flashlight spinning away into the void before vanishing. The sound of his fall echoed like a coffin slamming shut. Ethan stood frozen, his chest heaving, his hands trembling so badly the camera rattled. For the first time, he was alone. Truly alone. The tunnel around him was silent, except for one sound, slow, deliberate, metallic. Clink, clink, clink. The miner was close. Ethan whispered into the darkness, more to himself than the camera. "I can't do this. I can't." Then, faint and distant, he heard Sarah's voice again. "Ethan, help me." He raised the camera with shaking hands, filming the blackness ahead. And through the lens, he saw movement. A figure in a cracked helmet, standing perfectly still at the end of the tunnel, watching. Ethan's breath came in shallow bursts as his camera zoomed toward the figure at the end of the tunnel. The fog swirled unnaturally around it, bending and twisting like it was alive. The miner stood motionless, his cracked helmet reflecting the dim beam of Ethan's light. A jagged line split the visor, revealing only shadow beneath. In his hand, he gripped a rusted pickaxe, the metal stained dark with something that wasn't just rust. Ethan whispered hoarsely, "Oh my God." The figure tilted its head, slow, deliberate, inhumanly calm. Then with a grinding rasp, it stepped forward. Clink, clink, the sound of steel striking stone with every step. Ethan staggered back, his camera trembling. His flashlight flickered, and for one brief second, the darkness peeled away just enough to show what hid beneath the cracked visor. Not a face. Not anymore. The skin was blackened, charred like coal. Hollow sockets glowed faintly, like embers deep in a dying fire. His jaw hung wrong, broken but still moving, as if whispering words Ethan couldn't hear. The miner lifted his pickaxe slowly, scraping it along the tunnel wall. Sparks hissed into the air. Ethan's knees buckled. "Sarah, where are you?" The miner moved suddenly, impossibly fast for something so heavy. Ethan turned and bolted, the camera bouncing wildly as he sprinted down the narrow tunnel. The sound followed him. Clink, 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 closer with each step. The ground shook, beams groaned, and dirt rained from the ceiling. Ethan stumbled into a cavernous chamber. His flashlight revealed dozens of mining helmets scattered across the floor, each cracked or shattered, their lamps long dead. And on the walls, scratches, hundreds of them. Names, dates, desperate messages like "He's coming" and "Don't look." Ethan spun in a circle, panic surging. There was no way out. The miner stepped into the chamber, the lantern light behind him casting his shadow tall against the wall. His breath came out like steam, though the air was ice cold. He raised one blackened hand and pointed the pickaxe directly at Ethan. The whispers swelled again, rising from the walls, the helmets, the earth itself. Ethan clutched his head, screaming. Through the cacophony, one phrase repeated over and over. "She's mine. She's mine. She's mine." Ethan collapsed to his knees, the camera still recording, his tears streaking down his dirt-covered face. He realized then the truth. Sarah wasn't being lured. She was being, and the miner was warning him. Ethan's chest burned as he forced himself back onto his feet, the camera still clenched in his shaking hands. The whispers pressed against his skull, but through them, he heard it again. Sarah's voice, closer this time. "Ethan, please, help me." He staggered toward the sound, deeper into the tunnels. Behind him, the clink, clink, clink of the miner's steps followed, steady, unhurried, as if the thing knew there was nowhere Ethan could run that it wouldn't find him. Ethan turned a corner and nearly tripped over a rusted lantern lying on the ground. He grabbed it, striking it desperately until the wick caught with a faint orange glow. The dim light illuminated a narrow passage. Symbols were carved into the stone here too. More runes, spirals, jagged marks that looked like eyes staring from the rock itself. The deeper he went, the warmer the air became, though the warmth felt wrong, thick, suffocating, like breathing smoke. At the far end of the passage, he saw her, Sarah. She stood in the flickering glow of dozens of candles arranged in a ritual circle. Her back turned. Her hands hung limp at her sides, her hair veiling her face. "Sarah!" Ethan shouted, sprinting toward her. She turned slowly. Her eyes glowed faintly, like coals deep in a dying fire. Her lips moved, but the words weren't hers. They were his. "You should have left, Ethan." Ethan froze, the lantern shaking in his hand. "No, this isn't you. Fight it." She stepped toward him, her movements stiff, unnatural. The shadows clung to her body, bending the candlelight around her. Ethan bolted, clutching the lantern, the whispers turning into screams around him. He sprinted through passage after passage, the ground trembling beneath his feet. The miner followed, his shadow spilling down the walls like a flood of darkness. Sarah's voice echoed from every direction, distorted and broken. "Don't leave me. Help me. You promised." The lantern's flame flickered violently. Ethan's breath came in ragged sobs, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Then he stumbled into a cavern where an old railway track split in two directions. He froze, unsure which way to run. The clink of boots on stone grew louder behind him. The miner was close. Ethan's chest heaved as he stood at the fork in the underground railway tracks, the lantern's flame sputtering in his trembling hand. Behind him, the clink, clink, clink of steel boots echoed closer, rattling the beams. From the left tunnel came Sarah's voice, soft and desperate. "Ethan, I need you." From the right came a deeper whisper, the miner's rasping growl. "She's mine." Ethan's eyes darted between the two paths. His instincts screamed to run, but his heart dragged him left, toward Sarah. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, lit by rows of guttering candles. Symbols carved into the stone glowed faintly, as if alive, and in the center stood Sarah. But she was no longer Sarah. Her eyes burned red in the candlelight, her skin pale and cracked like coal. She clutched a rusted pickaxe, her small hands trembling as though something unseen guided her. Ethan's heart broke at the sound. "Sarah, fight him. You're stronger than this. Don't let him take you." She staggered forward, her face twisted with agony, half of it hers, half a shadow crawling across her skin. "I can't stop it, Ethan. He's inside me. Her scream cut the air as her body convulsed. The shadows wrapped tighter around her frame like chains. The cavern shook. From the darkness behind her, the miner's towering silhouette emerged fully at last. His cracked helmet reflected the candlelight, and for the first time, Ethan saw him in his entirety. A hulking figure in tattered mining gear, flesh blackened like char, his ribs half exposed, glowing faintly like smoldering coal. His pickaxe dragged sparks as it scraped along the stone. He raised it high, aimed not at Ethan, but at Sarah. Ethan screamed, "No!" Without thinking, Ethan charged forward, slamming into Sarah and knocking her out of the ritual circle. She collapsed to the ground, gasping, the glow in her eyes flickering. The miner roared, a sound that shook the cavern, and swung the pickaxe down. Ethan raised the lantern, shoving it into the miner's chest. The glass shattered. Fire erupted, swallowing them both in blinding light. Ethan's scream echoed with the miners, their voices entwined, the sound tearing through the tunnels. Sarah crawled backward, tears streaming down her face as the flames consumed the ritual symbols, burning them into ash. When the fire died, the cavern was silent. The miner's pickaxe lay cracked on the floor, and Ethan was gone. Days later, the fog still clung to the town. Sarah, pale and broken, walked alone down the main street. The motel sign. She stopped at the edge of town, where the old welcome sign stood, half buried in the mist. "Welcome to Hollow Creek." Her reflection in the rusted metal caught her eye. For a moment, she saw herself, just herself. Then, faintly, she saw the cracked visor of a miner's helmet staring back. And in the silence, a whisper only she could hear. "Not over." The fog swallowed the sign, whole. Fade to black.